Hey there, everyone. Today I'd like to talk about William Burroughs' Queer, a fascinating instance of his early work featuring some of his best prose. And it's so effective at describing various relational and libidinal dynamics that I'd like to talk about here, looking at a few select passages and picking out their theoretical philosophical importance. Here's a very general question Burroughs asks about what it means to live. What is the difference between desire for a relationship and desire for an audience? As deeply interrelated as they are also opposed to one another, as relationship is union, while the audience is the other, and therefore irremediably entailing some separation. One can never wholly be, especially not have, the other without them ceasing to be an other. Burroughs is therefore always demanding an audience at the same time that he tries to take them over, control them in some way, using the power of his writing to seduce. One thing that I really love, and we see this especially in Burroughs' earlier writings, is that he uses colloquial American English so perfectly, slipping in constructions like on page 21, he rushed out the door instead of he rushed out of the door. So there's a preposition elision that's really common in American amongst other Englishes, and he slips these in really interesting ways that gives his writing something of a free character, right? It's that classic beatnik character of one who is from the streets. We see this in the way that he creates his own lexicon for discussing and describing relationships, desire, and psychic energy in the way that he desires. This leads to odd constructions where a new construction is implemented where one would expect the old, correct one. For example, on page 27, Lee had conversational routines that Allerton had never heard, where conversational routines refers to a particular type of connection via captivating praxis, that is, the stylistic figure of the routine. This is something that he's developing throughout his early works, setting up these little picaresque vignettes. To read Burroughs, one has to be hip to these unique constructions and styles and their meanings in particular contexts, such as bars, street corners, and hotels. Burroughs therefore paints a very interesting picture of American life, and especially of the underground that is the everyday for so much of the American population. Burroughs is making a point, however, that extends well beyond just the underground. It applies to everyone. That life, everything that is and moves and changes, is a routine. It is a series of repeated figures differing from each other and establishing all manner of relations, and therefore is a type or form of writing. A good theoretical equivalent of this might be Derrida's concept of arche writing. This is a fundamental capacity of inscription that allows for the playing out, the performing of identity through repeated inscription. This is what Burroughs means when he writes in his introduction about writing as inoculation. Writing is both protecting from something at the same time that it demands that we are shot through with flows, hence the interest in shooting up, especially heroin, for Burroughs and his writing. Burroughs gives us a perfect description of his own writing when, also in the introduction, he writes, "A straitjacket notation carefully paralyzed with heavy reluctance." That is the lethargic mundanity created by junk that made him vulnerable to what he calls the ugly spirit, this invading demoniacal force from without. And yet, it's also the thing he most desired in a grotesque and backward sort of way. And this grotesquerie and backwardness is fundamental to understanding and appreciating Burroughs' writing. Maybe this is what Burroughs is trying to teach us about desire, in a properly Bataillean sort of way. That desire is not for the proper, but for the evil, the harmful, that which does its violence to us, insofar as true contact or connection with it entails a radical deformation of elements. Hence, identity is always on the violent precipice of arousal in Burroughs, spontaneously and instantly capable of changing registers, symbolized in Burroughs' work by spontaneous orgasms that notably often occur after drunk cessation. There's a sudden inundation of the senses, the likes of which we get in Rimbaud. Hence, Burroughs is always deploying subterraneanly a radically new atheology, akin to Bataille's, figuring life as radically volatile, violent, and populated by multiplicity. This is obliquely visible in his theory of possession, epitomized in the aforementioned ugly spirit, itself a sort of secular demonology. As he puts it in the introduction, "My concept of possession is closer to the medieval model than to modern psychological explanations, must come from within and never, never, never from without, as if there were some clear-cut difference between inner and outer." This is an atheology because it is a radically religiously antithetical theology that only works in a post-God world after his death in modernity a la Nietzsche. Based on a new world in which power is radically immanent in not just scientific matter, but mystical material or flesh. All identity is therefore leveled into a porous, permeable membrane spilling forth with gaps into which one can phallically penetrate with words. It's as if the world is fuckable. This accounts for the almost childlike vitality of Burroughs' writing, where crafting words into sentences is to create connections, establishing a state of contact, which is, as Joyce puts it in Ulysses, a mystical state, an apostolic succession from only begetter to only begotten. It's a Nietzschean aesthetic vision of an ascent via the power of aesthetic creation, elevating the body to newfound power. Burroughs is therefore, in an important sense, an empowering author. He gives us a vision of a world populated by libidinal forces, all of which are purely immanent and entrenched in bodies, mingling and with the potential to incite revolutions. But desire is still complicated for Burroughs. It is not simply a vehicle for positive transformation. He writes on page 25 of Queer, "The limitations of his desires were like the bars of a cage, like a chain and collar, something he had learned as an animal learns, through days and years of experience, the snub of the chain, the unyielding bars. He had never resigned himself, and his eyes looked out through the invisible bars, watchful, alert, waiting for the keeper to forget the door, for the frayed collar, the loosened bar, suffering without despair and without consent." Desire is for Burroughs, in its raw, undiluted form, lethal, like shooting pure death itself. Desire is only powerful because it always carries with it the possibility of annihilation. A radical reversal, if it can be made so, desire is also one of the nets flung upon one by outside forces. Desire is thereby a complex, libidinal symbolic grid through which one comes to form connections in the universe. Burroughs is also at pains to make a sadomasochistic point as well. We desire what holds us in its clutches, what addicts us, and hence drugs. Drugs are a frequent aspect of the content of Burroughs' writing, yet they also simultaneously act at a high level of generality and equivocality as a libidinal symbol for the control that comes with the establishment of any connections of any kind. All connections entail states of attraction and confluence, wherein control must be relinquished to that beyond our horizon of being, beyond our control. In this state of liminality, in between the law and annihilation, that is, excess, determinacy and necessity are suspended, and an otherworldly reign of magic at a distance invades. This is what Burroughs means when he refers to writing as a power of possession. It is a confluence of souls, akin to the establishment of a telepathic and parasitic relationship that severs old bonds and establishes new ones. It's like one's brain in a state of synaptogenesis resulting from psychedelic-induced neuroplasticity. This is the edge of terror that is Burroughs' writing. It is a malevolent peek of Burroughs back at himself, paralyzed with a heavy reluctance, a writer's block like a straitjacket. I glance at the manuscript of Queer and feel I simply can't read it. My past was a poisoned river from which one was fortunate to escape, and by which one feels immediately threatened, years and years after recording. Painful to an extent I find it difficult to read, let alone to write about. Every word and gesture sets the teeth on edge. While he resorts here to the somewhat distancing construction, sets the teeth on edge instead of one's or even my teeth, one must realize the import of this for reading any of Burroughs' work. He is saying this about his own thoughts. Of course, the psychological content being so violently painful, the writing of his about that content would be so abrasive, extreme, and grotesque. It'd be strange to see anything otherwise. The back cover of my copy of Queer features a most astute observation. It is a raw, probing, mercilessly unsentimental work of fiction. Unsentimental indeed. The work seems to revel in the existential pits of Burroughs himself as he works through his sexual ambivalence with whatever tools he manages to conjure up, as is evidenced by a short, vulnerable episode from the beginning of Queer on pages 8 and 9. When Lee arrived at the KC Steakhouse, Moore was already there. With him he had Tom Williams, another Salt Lake City boy. Lee thought, he brought along a chaperone. I like the guy, Tom, but I can't stand to be alone with him. He keeps trying to go to bed with me. That's what I don't like about queers. You can't keep it on the basis of friendship. Yes, Lee could hear that conversation. During dinner, Moore and Williams talked about a boat they planned to build at Chuahuantanejo. Lee thought that this was a silly project. Boat building's a job for a professional, isn't it? Lee asked. Moore pretended not to hear. After dinner, Lee walked back to Moore's rooming house with Moore and Williams. At the door, Lee asked, "Would you gentlemen care for a drink? I'll get a bottle." He looked from one to the other. Moore said, "Well, no. You see, we want to work on the plans for this boat we're going to build." "Oh," said Lee. "Well, I'll see you tomorrow. How about meeting me for a drink at the Ratskeller, say around 5? "Well, I expect I'll be busy tomorrow." "Yes, but you have to eat and drink." "Well, you see, this boat is more important to me than anything right now. It'll take up all my time." Lee said, "Suit yourself," and walked away. Lee was deeply hurt. He could hear Moore saying, "Thanks for running interference, Tom. Well, I hope he got the idea. Of course, Lee's an interesting guy and all that, but this queer situation is just more than I can take." Tolerant, looking at both sides of the question, sympathetic up to a point, finally forced to draw a tactful but firm line. And he really believes that, Lee thought. Like that crap about building up his wife's ego. He can revel in the satisfactions of virulent bitchiness and simultaneously see himself as a saint. Quite a trick. Actually, Moore's brush-off was calculated to inflict the maximum hurt possible under the circumstances. It put Lee in the position of a detestably insistent queer, too stupid and too insensitive to realize that his attentions were not wanted, forcing Moore to the distasteful necessity of drawing a diagram. Lee leaned against a lamppost for several minutes. The shock had sobered him, drained away his drunken euphoria. He realized how tired he was and how weak, but he was not ready yet to go home. That being said, that's it for this lecture. I hope it's been somewhat interesting, giving you some things to think about. I definitely suggest that you give this work a read. I'm still chunking my way through it, but it gives me so many thoughts, and to me, it is such a rich part of Burroughs' career, even considering its belated publication. You can check out any of my other lectures I've done on postmodernism, German idealism, gender theory, post-colonial studies, and other classical literature. You can also become a channel member for $5 a month and gain access to, among other things, a private philosophy Zoom. I also have super thanks if you'd just like to donate to the channel, because it really helps me out and helps me purchase the books necessary to bring y'all content. That being said, that's it for this lecture, and I'll see you in another one.